A great man once said, "The only constant is change." I don't know who that great man was. I'm not even sure if it was a man. Or it may be something that I completely just made up. But the fact is, whoever said it, even if it wasn't said, it is still true. For instance, if you look at all my videos over the last 6 years, you'll notice that the background has changed a lot as I've moved from different houses and different rooms and tried new things, not always successfully. But if that is true for the background of my videos, it's even more true for the world that we have to parent in. Let's talk about that.
You're watching Afro Daddy. Hey, that's my dad.
Hey there! Welcome to Afro Daddy. As I'm getting older, one of my favorite things to read about or talk about or reminisce about are all the things that my kids and your kids will have really no idea about. So for instance, talking about the internet. The fact that we didn't have access to it until I was a teenager, and that when we did get access to it, it always came with this sound. And that once that sound finished, you were finally connected to the slowest level you could possibly imagine. That loading one photo took like 2 minutes. And while you were on the internet, no one else was able to use the phone. And speaking about phones, I would tell them that it was connected via a long cable to a box where you'd either press the numbers or you'd have to rotate the numbers around, and then that box was connected to the wall, which connected to something else. And no, there were no apps on those phones because those phones did not have screens. And speaking about screens, we would talk about how we would have to rush home from school in time for your favorite cartoon, because if you didn't get home in time, you missed it and it was gone forever. And even if you got there in time, you would watch 5 minutes of the show, then there'd be about 30 seconds to 2 minutes of ads, which you could not skip, and then the show would continue. And no, you couldn't choose what you wanted to watch at whatever time, because whatever was on the channel at that time was on. The lack of control over what you consumed is a very strange thing for my kids. Now, do they have better technology than we ever had? Definitely. Would I have loved to have the kind of tech that they have in my home when I was growing up? Completely. I would have loved it. I mean, my favorite TV games were nothing more than kind of blurry blobs on a screen. They have like hyper-realistic soccer players that look like the actual people running around. I say they don't. I do. I play a lot of TV games still. But there are cool things that we got to experience that our kids will never get to experience. I mean, in the post 9/11 world, the pilots in planes are now completely blocked off from the rest of us. Back in the day, kids were able to come and see what the inside of a plane cabin looked like and got to see what the pilots did. Now that is locked down. Another problem is that parents have a lot more access to information and news than they've ever had before, so that makes us a lot more scared for our children. We're a lot more aware of what could go wrong, so helicopter parenting is a real thing. So kids don't get to develop freely in the way that they used to. Also, our kids don't have the privilege of being bored anymore. I remember being bored, and that's where I developed a love for reading. That's where I developed a love for creativity and finding ways to entertain myself and entertain my friends, because we didn't have anything else grabbing our attention. And yes, nowadays kids just have content streaming at them constantly wherever they're looking, but it's not just the media's fault. I mean, the amount of attention that is required from our kids just for their schooling is crazy. It's a lot more than was ever required from me at like 7 and 8 years old. And then there's a lot more pressure from us, their parents, to achieve, because we don't want them to be average. No, my child can't be average. My child needs to be exceptional. So if you're a C student, no, we're gonna give you extra lessons to get you to be an A level. So there's so much more that kids have to take in and consume and deal with before they can just be kids. And that's why I say that they don't have the privilege of being bored in the way that we had. Now, I understand how ironic the next thing I'm going to say is, but the fact that we all have access to really good cameras on our phones is really problematic for our children, because when we were growing up, photos were for a special occasion. You know, maybe special festivals, maybe birthdays, and you had one spool of film in a camera that lasted for the whole year. So for a whole year of a child's life, you got 36 photos. We will take 36 photos of our kids in one sitting of a normal day. Hey, they're sitting on the couch, click. Hey, they're doing something fun outside, click. These kids can't just do what they're doing without being on camera. And that must be really exhausting. Imagine these kids having to understand that they can't just think about what they're doing, but what it looks like on the outside all the time. I mean, that's what they're growing up with, and that's partly our fault. Maybe we need to start thinking about the fact that some things can just be a memory in your mind and not a memory on Facebook. And yes, I'm saying that to myself as well. But on the flip side, I get a sense that our kids are living in a world where there's a lot more space for everyone, where people who normally wouldn't be heard or seen or respected are starting to demand that those things start to happen. And that's a good thing. And our kids are going to have to learn to deal with the complexity of that world in a way that maybe we didn't have to. And of course, as parents, if we want to help our kids learn those lessons, we have to learn those lessons first. This is where a changing world affects parents in a big way. My mom is constantly telling me that all the things that made a good parent when she was parenting is completely different from all the things that make a good parent now. She points out that there are so many more things that we have to think about. We have to worry about screen time, and when do our kids get a cell phone, and how do they deal with this new complexity with people that maybe we wouldn't have interacted with as children, or how do we deal with new ways of talking about people and to people, and how do we deal with the new social complexities that have kind of always existed but now we are properly talking about. These are things that she did not have to worry about. Granted, she had other concerns, but she didn't have to worry about these things, and that just shows us how much the world has changed since she had kids that were the same age as my kids. And look, I think it's fine for us to maybe mourn the loss of that world a bit, but I think it's even more important that we find ways to move on and adapt and show our children how to survive in this new world. That's a big part of what parenting is showing our kids how to adapt to a world that we are not adapted for. I think that's kind of what makes parenting extra hard as well. So I'd love to know about all the things that you wish your kids could experience that you experienced. Leave them in the comments below. Like, what things do you think they're missing out on that maybe the 80s and 90s had? I think that'll be a fun thing to kind of reminisce about and maybe have a little bit of fun nostalgia moments. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll catch you soon. Aphrodaddy out.
You're watching Aphrodaddy. Hey, that's my dad.